The Charleston sky glowed with soft gold and deep blue, as if the whole city had dressed for the occasion. I had chosen carefully 2 polished earrings, the silk scarf Miles once gave me, and a dress that spoke of quiet dignity rather than show. This was supposed to be a celebration. Savannah and Miles had been married for 5 years, and tonight's dinner was described as intimate, just close family. I thought that meant I would belong. The maitre d' greeted me with professional ease, asked my name, and checked the reservation list. His brows furrowed. Clara Bellamy. I see the Preston party here, but I don't have your name listed. And I'm afraid the table is already full. He gestured toward the window, where 10 chairs surrounded a long table. All were occupied. Savannah sat at the center in deep navy, her hair swept high, her expression polished enough for a magazine cover. She looked at me and smiled faintly, the kind of smile that reminded you someone had already claimed victory. "Oh, Clara," she said lightly, as though my arrival were unexpected. "You were invited. When Miles called to say he couldn't make it, I assumed you wouldn't come either. It's a family dinner after all." Her voice lingered on the word family like perfume turned sour. Then she added, almost sweetly, that she'd given my seat to the Sheridans' friends just back from Europe. The eyes at the table grazed over me like I was something misplaced. Savannah's head tilted, her voice sharp behind the smile. "Maybe a budget place would suit you better." For a moment I was 16 again, standing in borrowed heels, reminded that I didn't belong. But instead of shrinking, I inhaled, slowly straightened my posture, and simply said, "Excuse me." I turned from the table with quiet grace. It wasn't the first time I had been reminded of my beginnings. I was raised above a pawn shop in Columbia, South Carolina, by a mother who worked herself ragged between the diner and cleaning houses. I did my homework in corner booths while she poured coffee for strangers. By 16, I was waitressing myself, holding scholarships and coffee-fueled nights together to make it through college. There was no time for sororities or spring breaks. I had bills and a mother who needed medicine. After graduation, I climbed through hotel work, hostess, assistant manager, front desk, until by 38, I was running the largest boutique hotel in Charleston. I had built everything from nothing. So when Miles, my only son, brought home Savannah with her perfect teeth and pearls, I tried to find common ground. She came from old money family names engraved on country club walls. I thought love might bridge the gap, so I listened politely to her talk of floral consultants and skincare routines. But over the years, the gap widened. Invitations skipped me, my name disappeared from group messages, and carefully sweet remarks belittled me in ways only I seemed to notice. "Isn't it charming how down-to-earth she is, or she's not really into fine dining, so we'll keep it simple when she visits." I laughed along, too proud to reveal the sting. Miles never noticed. His love made him blind to subtle cruelty. But I did. I knew Savannah wasn't mocking my tastes, she was mocking my past. When my husband died, Miles was only 12. I became both parents, working double shifts, patching drywall, negotiating with insurance, and holding our lives together. I co-signed his first lease, added him to my account so he could buy his first car, and taught him how to navigate the adult world. I gave him roots, then wings, and he soared. By 24, he was in finance, wearing suits that fit, and living in a townhouse on the river. That's when Savannah appeared, gracious at first, but sharper once the vows were exchanged. The first Christmas after the wedding, I received no invitation, only a forwarded email from Miles at the last minute. The second, I showed up with homemade pie and found a caterer setting down crème brûlée instead. She hosted showers without me, explained away my absence with false kindness, and smiled while erasing me piece by piece. I stayed quiet because I believed that love for my son meant patience. But now, in the glow of Chateau Alon, patience had worn thin. The maitre d' still stood by his podium when I returned. "Would you tell Chef Damien that Clara Bellamy is here?" I asked softly. His eyes widened, and he hurried away. Moments later, Damien emerged from the kitchen, sleeves rolled high, apron dusted with flour. His booming voice carried across the room. "Clara, why didn't you tell me you were coming? I'd have rolled out the red carpet." He hugged me warmly, and heads at Savannah's table turned. The room shifted. Damien frowned as he spotted the full table and Savannah's frozen smile. He turned to the maitre d'. "Set table 12, the chef's table, for Miss Bellamy." Gasps rose. Savannah's eyes flicked nervously, but Damien wasn't done. "She's the reason we have a chef's table," he said. "Her insights helped us rebuild when we were struggling." Staff moved quickly, linens crisp, candles lit silver polished. I sat at the chef's table with quiet dignity, not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it long ago. As dishes arrived, amuse-bouche quail with honey lavender glaze, a pairing of wine I had once suggested, the dining room hushed. Savannah's table faltered, conversation thinning to murmurs. She finally approached, perfume sharp, voice brittle. "Quite the coincidence. Chef's table signature wine, how convenient." I met her gaze calmly. "I didn't pull strings. You gave away my seat." I sat at the one I earned. Chef Damien appeared again, his hand on my shoulder. "Miss Bellamy rebuilt this restaurant from the inside out. She deserves every respect." The dining room paused, listening. Savannah faltered, muttered something, and withdrew. The spotlight she craved had shifted, and the silence at her table spoke louder than any applause at mine. The courses arrived like chapters of a story I had helped write. The scallop nestled in corn puree, the quail with lavender glaze, the carefully chosen wine, each dish whispered of the nights I had sat with Damien, sketching menus, encouraging him to trust his instincts when investors pushed for pretension over heart. I sipped and savored, not to prove anything, but because this was a homecoming of sorts. From the corner of my eye, I could feel the discomfort spreading at Savannah's table. Forks moved slower, laughter thinned. Grace, one of her friends, rose, quietly murmured in Savannah's ear, and left with her husband soon after. The Sheridans, who had taken my seat, shifted uneasily, avoiding my gaze. Miles's Aunt Lorraine, dignified as ever, crossed the dining room and joined me at table 12 without a word. Her eyes met mine in a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement that she had seen enough. That gesture steadied me more than any speech could. By dessert, Damien presented something spectacular. A chocolate dome crowned with edible gold, the plate inscribed with "The Bellamy." A ripple moved through the room as whispers spread. Some guests leaned toward one another. "She's the one who helped redesign this place." Damien raised his glass. "To Clara Bellamy for seeing what we could be when we had forgotten ourselves. We wouldn't be here without her." Applause followed, quiet, but real. Across the room, Savannah's shoulders stiffened. She stared at her untouched crème brûlée while I tapped my spoon gently against the shell of the dessert that bore my name. I did not gloat. I did not rise to make a speech. I simply ate calm and unshaken as Savannah's carefully built stage dissolved around her. The next morning, Miles called. His voice was tense, hurried, as though he'd found a private corner to speak. "I heard something happened last night," he said. "Savannah's upset, but she won't tell me why." I sat on the edge of my bed, tea cooling beside me. For once, I didn't soften the truth. I told him everything: the missing chair, the cruel smirk, the years of omissions, and carefully curated exclusions. I told him about Christmas invitations that never came, the family messages that left me out, the subtle erasures that built into last night's humiliation. Miles was silent for a long time. I could hear his breath catch under the weight of it. Finally, he said, "You gave me everything, and I let her humiliate you." I tried to offer grace, telling him he hadn't known, but even I could hear the hollowness of my words. "I should have," he said, voice hardening. "I'm flying home tonight." True to his word, he was back by the following afternoon. I didn't witness the confrontation, but I knew it was fierce. Savannah packed a weekender bag, while Miles stood in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "I need space," he told her. "And you need to think about how you treat people." For the first time, the blinders had fallen from his eyes. Word traveled quickly through Charleston's circles. Friends on the food and wine board sent notes of admiration. Someone sent flowers, others offered congratulations. A feature in Charleston Table soon followed, calling me the quiet force behind the city's dining renaissance and publishing 2 of my recipes, one of them, my mother's sweet potato cornbread. Savannah's once flawless social calendar began to look emptier. A few clubs dropped her quietly from their lists. The edges of her perfect image blurred. I didn't revel in her decline, though. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her. Sitting across from Miles's cousin Elise at a coffee shop a week later, I learned a truth that reframed everything. Elise stirred her drink slowly before confessing. "You know Savannah wasn't always Savannah, right? She grew up in a trailer park outside Augusta. Her name was Rachel Ann Sawyer back then. Changed it after college, reinvented herself. She used to skip lunch in high school because they couldn't afford it. Her mom was a waitress." The words sank deep. It wasn't that she thought I was beneath her. It was that I reminded her of herself before she buried that girl beneath pearls and country clubs. I was living proof that you could come from nothing and still carry yourself with dignity without erasing the past. She hadn't feared my judgment. She had feared my freedom. That realization settled over me like evening tide. I no longer felt rage, only pity. She had built her entire life on the fear of being found out. And in me, she saw the reflection she wanted to forget. At home, my little cottage felt more like sanctuary than ever. White shutters and herb garden by the porch, the smell of salt drifting through the open windows. Miles came by often now, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with silence. He never asked me to forgive, Savannah, never asked me to fix what had broken. He just sat present, as though finally seeing me in full. The dinner at Chateau Alon became a story that spread farther than I expected. But for me, it became something simpler, a reminder that I didn't need the seat someone else offered. I had built my own table, and it was strong enough to hold everything I had carried to get here. The weeks that followed unfolded quietly, yet each day seemed to stitch me back together in ways I hadn't realized I needed. For years, I had shown up at events where my place was diminished, laughed politely at the subtle cuts, and told myself that patience was the price of family. But after that night, I no longer carried the weight of trying to belong where I was unwelcome. I carried something different, the certainty that I had built my own life, one no one could erase. Savannah's absence from Charleston's social calendar became noticeable. Friends who once clung to her parties and catered soirees began to drift away, their loyalty thinning when the spotlight dimmed. Meanwhile, my own presence began to ripple unexpectedly. Invitations arrived not because I was Miles's mother, but because people wanted my perspective, my counsel. Restaurants asked for advice. Young women in hospitality sought me out, asking how I had risen from diner shifts to boardroom strategies. I opened my door to them. Daughters of line cooks and servers, first-generation college students, balancing jobs with studies. I saw myself in them. Over tea or in the quiet corner of a restaurant, I told them what I had once needed to hear, that humility and confidence could live in the same body, that you didn't have to erase your story to build a new one. Miles remained steady at my side. On Sundays, he visited, sometimes filling the house with laughter, sometimes sitting in silence that felt just as precious. He was still unraveling the threads of his marriage, still trying to understand how love had blinded him to cruelty. I didn't press him for answers. I had learned that some truths must be carried in private until the heart is ready to set them down. One evening, as we shared a simple supper, he confessed, "I used to think Savannah was protecting me, keeping things smooth between us. Now, I see she was protecting herself from you, from what you represented." His voice broke, and I reached across the table, resting my hand over his. "You don't need to protect me," I said. "I've been surviving since long before she entered your life." His shoulders eased, and I saw the boy he once was flicker through his tired expression, the boy who ate dinosaur-shaped pancakes on Sunday mornings. It was Elise again who offered the piece of the puzzle that finally completed the picture. Over coffee, she told me more about Savannah's past, about Rachel Sawyer and the trailer park outside Augusta, about a mother who bent her back waiting tables just as mine had, and a girl who reinvented herself so thoroughly she nearly erased the memory of where she'd come from. I listened, and pity swelled within me. For years, I thought Savannah despised me for being beneath her. In truth, she despised me for standing in the life she had abandoned, for proving it was possible to rise without pretending to be someone else. The night Elise told me this, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and the sound of waves drifting in from the dock. The air was cool, the stars scattered like lanterns, and for the first time in years, I felt no anger. What I felt was heavier, but somehow gentler pity for the woman who feared her own reflection. My life settled into a rhythm that felt honest. The cottage wasn't large, but it was mine. The shutters gleamed white, the herb garden bloomed, and the sea air filled the rooms like a promise of peace. And yet this wasn't solitude. I was not alone. My table grew fuller. Aunt Lorraine became a constant guest, her okra always arriving steaming and seasoned. Damien and his wife visited often, bringing laughter and desserts so elaborate they could have been in a gallery. My mentees, shy at first, now shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs with ease. Miles, always Miles, anchoring it all. I poured glasses of my signature Bellamy cocktail from a chilled decanter. The bourbon warmed, the cherry syrup sweet, and looked around the room at the faces lit by candlelight. At the far end of the table, a single chair remained empty, not as a symbol of exclusion, not as a silent rebuke, but as a reminder. There is always room for those willing to learn, to share, to grow. No one asked what it meant. They didn't need to. The understanding was already there. We ate, we laughed, we dreamed aloud about kitchens we would build if no one told us what couldn't be done. It was the sound of people once underestimated speaking boldly, living fully. And as the night wound down, the candles burning low, I looked around and felt something unshakable settle inside me. I hadn't been given a seat. I had built my own table, and around it sat people who knew my worth without needing to be convinced. The seasons shifted, and with them the air in Charleston seemed lighter. Word of that dinner at Chateau Alon lingered far beyond what I ever imagined. It became a quiet story people retold about dignity restored and respect finally named. But for me, it was less about reputation and more about release. For the first time in decades, I stopped bending myself to fit spaces that had never truly welcomed me. The cottage became a hub of warmth. Some evenings were loud, filled with laughter spilling out into the garden, and other nights were hushed, where only the sound of clinking glasses and soft conversation filled the air. Miles came often, sometimes bringing fresh flowers, sometimes arriving with nothing but his tired smile. He didn't talk about Savannah much anymore. Their marriage unraveled in silence, not with shouting, but with distance, as if the truth had finally drained all pretense away. He confessed once that he feared he had failed me. I told him he hadn't, He had simply loved someone who wasn't ready to love without fear. That wasn't failure, it was part of learning. I poured energy into mentoring the young women who sought me out. They came from small towns working shifts between classes, balancing ambition with exhaustion. I recognized their eyes the same determination I had once carried as I studied under fluorescent library lights. I taught them the things no one had told me: how to negotiate without apology, how to enter a room without shrinking, how to hold both humility and pride in the same breath. Watching them grow, watching their shoulders straighten as they realized they belonged, filled me with a joy deeper than any banquet or accolade. Meanwhile, Savannah's name slipped from the lists that once defined her. No dramatic scandal announced her fall, no headline declared her unmasked. It was quieter than that. Invitations simply stopped arriving. People who once hovered around her no longer returned her calls. The social shine dimmed until she was just another woman searching for footing in a city that had already moved on. I did not gloat. In truth, I rarely thought of her anymore. When her image flickered through my mind, it was not with anger, but with that same heavy pity I had felt the night Elise told me her story. I wondered sometimes if she ever sat at her own table and realized the futility of erasing the past. On Sundays, our small gathering often grew beyond expectation. Lorraine would arrive early, clattering through the door with casseroles and opinions in equal measure. Damien and his wife brought laughter as effervescent as the champagne they sometimes carried. The mentees came shy, then left bolder, always carrying extra food wrapped in foil. And Miles, dear Miles, who often lingered after everyone else had gone, sitting with me on the porch in the quiet. Some nights we spoke of ordinary things. Other nights he leaned back, eyes on the stars, and whispered, "I see it now, Mom. Everything you did, everything you carried for me." I would smile, knowing that at last he truly understood. One evening, as the candles burned down and conversation ebbed, I looked at the empty chair that always remained at the end of the table. It had become a symbol to me. Not a seat reserved for the woman who had tried to erase me, not a monument to bitterness, but an invitation for anyone willing to join with humility, respect, and honesty. A chair waiting not for privilege, but for courage. That night, after the dishes were washed and the last guest departed, I stood in the doorway of my home and let the sea breeze wash over me. Life had taken me from a pawnshop apartment above a diner to this small but radiant space by the water. I had been told I did not belong, that I was too plain, too humble, too unpolished for the tables others set. But I had learned something they never expected: worth is not bestowed by invitation, it is claimed through perseverance, through kindness, through the refusal to disappear. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is that dignity is not granted by others. It is built brick by brick through every choice we make. You can be erased from a list, excluded from a room, dismissed with a smile. But if you continue to rise, to create, to build your own table, no one can take away what you've earned. So tonight, as the waves tapped gently against the dock and the candles faded into smoke, I understood fully I never needed the chair they refused me. I had built a table of my own, and every seat at it was filled with something priceless: respect, resilience, and love. Thank you for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear